She was probably the single largest influence in my life, because my mother always encouraged me. My mother was the one who put it in my head that there was nothing that I couldn't do. She was that person that was the yes you can person in my life. I remember when I was in grade school, there were things in the books, and I would go, every class I was in, it'd be all me and all of the other kids, and they were all white. And in the history books, it just seemed like it was so negative about black people. I hated it. And my mother, she said, well, if you don't like, and I told her in the school, you have to read this out loud, and I just didn't want to go. My mother said, well, read it so fast that they won't even know what you're saying. My mother taught me to read like the wind. And what we used to do was that in the evening, when she'd have her quiet time, after dinner, after the dishes, everything was done, we used to sit in the kitchen, and she would read the newspaper. It'd be her time, and she would read the newspaper. And so what we took to doing is that we would read it together, especially on Sundays, when they had to be up in the mountains where we were. They had a little local paper. But every Sunday, my father, who I called the original newspaper man in my life, he used to buy either the Pittsburgh paper or the Philadelphia Sunday paper. Sometimes he'd get both. And those were only about 3 or 4 papers we used to get. But my mom and I used to sit in the kitchen, and she would be reading, and she'd see something, and she'd say, well, listen to this. And then it would be my turn to tell her about a story that I saw, and she would say, well, read that to me. And it didn't occur to me until later in my life that really what she was doing, she was monitoring my reading skills and helping me be a better reader. And I remember one time I was in high school. So years after we began to do this, we used to do this when we were I'd be in my early years of elementary school. But I remember once when I was in high school, one day I was acting up, and a teacher kept me after school, and I was sitting there and doing nothing, and she brought a book over. She said, start reading in this book and read out loud. Excuse me. And so I took the book, and so I started reading. And then, just because I was just the two of us sitting there, and she was doing some other things, so I began to read each role out in the voice of whatever it was. And then I would start reading as fast as I could read, and I would do all these different things in reading. Finally, she stopped me, and she says to me, who in the world taught you to read like that? She couldn't believe that I learned to read. My mother taught me.